Hello and welcome to another complimentary training by LifterLMS. I've got a good friend and special guest. His name is Craig Hewitt. He's from Castos, which is a podcast hosting company, but it does a lot more than just that. It's also big in the WordPress ecosystem. If you've ever thought about starting a podcast, there's a plugin that goes with it that makes all the connection from the WordPress site to the podcast hosting and the syndication and everything super easy. He's also got a new feature set inside Castos that allows you to create something called private podcasts, which is, think of it kind of like as a course creator or a coach or having a membership site where you have a podcast that's not for the public to listen to, but for actually enrolled students. I got a little more intro to do, but first, Craig, thanks for coming on the show with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Chris. You caught me there just about to have a sip of coffee, so I apologize for it's my post lunch coffee that I'll be managing here a bit. But yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to share kind of what we know about podcasting, what we know about courses, and the folks that use both, and a little bit about private podcasting and how that can work with folks' courses.
That's awesome. We'll have a sip of coffee because I'm going to talk for a little more. I've been podcasting myself since 2014, actually the end of 2013, which is crazy to think it's been that long. But if I could recommend like one skill for marketing, for audience building, for community building, for building affinity with your audience, for teaching, I mean, podcast is like a superpower, both to be a consumer, but also a creator. So I'm just really, podcasting, I think, is just such an efficient way to do a lot of things. So I'm excited to get into it with you today. For those of you on the call, this is going to be an interactive session. So use the Q&A box, use the chat. Let us know what's landing well. Let us know what questions you have as we get into it. Craig's going to get into a presentation in just a little bit. We are going to be sending out a replay. So if you have to bounce or whatever, that's fine. You are going to get a replay. But if you stay to the end, we are doing a LifterLMS giveaway at the end of the call. So one person who's still here at the end is going to get a 1 year free of one of our $120 add-ons. If you're already a customer or you want something else, we can apply that in a different way. So stick around to the end. Yeah, and that's it. I'm excited. Podcasting is one of my favorite topics, and just what you've done to build the bridge, not only from a great podcasting tool, but into the course building community, specifically with private podcasts. Let's do it, Craig. What do you got for us today?
Awesome. Yeah. Let me share my screen real quick. I got more than a couple of slides that I'll run through here. Yeah, probably have about 30 minutes of just me talking. But Chris, as you mentioned, like really love things to be interactive. So folks that have questions, please chime in the chat. I'll have the chat open kind of here to the side. And can kind of stop and go through questions as needed. So yeah, so I think the kind of premise of today's talk is really how like courses and podcasting are like this match made in heaven, right? I think in a lot of ways they're complementary of each other, and it goes both ways. A lot of these things are like, hey, my course is my main thing, but like a podcast is like an add-on to that, and it's secondary. But I think a lot of people will say it really is kind of like the primary driver behind a lot of the value that is in their business. And we'll talk about that from a couple different perspectives. Yeah. So today, just talk about these kind of handful of things. One, podcasting and online courses, this kind of match made in heaven, really kind of natural way they go together. Going to talk marketing for a little bit. I'll talk about my background in a minute and why that maybe makes some more sense. Talk about like unique value that you as a course creator provide in the market, especially relative to your competition. Talk about public versus private podcasting. And then we'll walk through how to automate all of this that Chris talked about with private podcasting and Lifter for your courses. So kind of to just like set the stage and some background, I was giving a webinar kind of like this recently, and we got about 45 minutes through it, and someone raised their hand and they said, "What is a Convertkit?" For those of y'all who don't know, Convertkit is a really popular kind of email marketing or marketing automation platform, and so Chris did a very nice job of kind of describing what Castos is, but I wanted to give as a creator and our company so that the rest of what I say hopefully makes some sense. So what the heck is a Castos? So Castos is a podcast hosting platform. I think the like closest analogy for anyone who doesn't have a podcast is if you have like videos you would host on a platform like Wistia or Vimeo. A podcast host is that plus a whole bunch more, hopefully, if you have a good one. And it is kind of the home for your podcast where all of your files are stored and distributed. Get a lot of information about listener analytics. And the really cool ones, like ours, I hope, give you a lot of extensibility to talk and work with the other tools that you use in your online business. We like to say we're the center of your audio universe so that we have integrations with not just Zapier and a REST API, but tools like LifterLMS and Convertkit. And a couple of others specifically for private podcasting. We come from kind of an integration background. The kind of genesis of the Castos platform is in a WordPress plugin called Seriously Simple Podcasting. And we kind of took it from just a free plugin in the .org repo and are a SaaS platform that is really like an integration first kind of place these days. And who the heck am I? This is when I had, in some ways, less hair, in some ways, more hair. I'm Craig Hewitt. I'm the founder and CEO of Castos. We are an 11-person, entirely remote distributed team in 3 continents now. We used to be 4, but someone moved from Chile to Portugal, so we're back down to 3 continents. And we've been in business about 5 years and have kind of thousands of customers. I've been podcasting not quite as long as Chris, but since about 2015, have 250 something episodes on my main podcast and another 100 on a couple of other podcasts. At Castos, we do a pretty popular podcast that my colleague Matt Medeiros runs. It's called Audience. So if y'all are into kind of the behind the scenes nitty gritty of what makes a really good podcast, Audience is a pretty good one to check out. So I'll take a step back. Sorry. My background is in sales and marketing. So really kind of thinking a lot about how to not just create like a great product. And I think this applies if you're a SaaS application like Castos or you have an online course. But the goal is like to create this great product and then put it in front of as many people as you can to just like to relay that value proposition in a really genuine way. And so I think it's worth taking a minute to be kind of introspective about our marketing strategy for our courses. Because this beautiful flower of digital marketing is really intimidating to a lot of people, right? Because you, as either a beginner or a more experienced course creator, look at this and say, holy crap, I need to do all of these things to be successful. There's no possible way I can be successful at these, what is it, like 9 or 10 different marketing channels. I don't even know what some of these mean maybe, right? And like, I think this is where a lot of creators, especially who like their genesis is like, hey, I want to just create, and then I want to put this out there and people will find it. And I don't want to learn all this, kind of sleazy marketing stuff. I just want to make great stuff and have a successful business. And so they look at the landscape like this from a marketing perspective and just get overwhelmed. And they're like, well, I'm not going to do any of it. Right. And so they fail before they even get started. And that's the real shame, I think, of like a digital business is there are so many options and so many things out there that a lot of us just get overwhelmed and stop before we really get started. Does this like idea or like this difficulty kind of resonate with anybody like that's listening? Chris, you included, maybe? Do you look at this and say, yeah, I totally think we should be doing all this, and maybe I'm not really good at any of them, much less like most of them?
Yeah, there's so many channels or so many techniques. How do you do them all?
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, thanks for chiming in. Yeah, so I think like the question is, how do you pick one, and how do you feel good and have the conviction about just picking one and kind of going all in on it? We did a webinar about 6 weeks ago, and maybe we can kind of link to this and like an email follow up that we send later. It was with Jacques Hopkins. Jacques started in kind of the course world building piano in 21 days, and then transitioned a really successful, piano course. Now has a course about selling online courses. And Jacques said, like, he just kind of had an average business until he realized how to build like a repeatable and scalable funnel, kind of like he's showing this slide here, for his course. And in the webinar that we did, it was really interesting that he said, like, each of his 2 courses have a different primary channel. If you go back to that like beautiful flower of digital marketing, his 2 different courses have 2 different primary channels. One is YouTube for his piano course, and the other is podcasting for his like how to build a successful online course. And I thought it was really interesting. And what he said, like towards the end, is he said, like, YouTube is important and appropriate for some people just because a lot of people have a really visual element to their content. Piano, like maybe you have like a gardening or a magic like thing that you want to teach. Like, I can imagine YouTube being really important. But what a lot of us are selling, whether it's a software product or an online course, is like a future reality of someone's current situation, right? Like, you are in this market to buy a solution to a problem that you're having because you want to start a podcast but don't know how, or that you need a thing, or you want to learn gardening, or you want to get in shape, or you want to sleep better, or whatever. And this course that you all are selling is like the promise of this future reality for folks. And I think that when you say that and kind of, I think hopefully kind of come to terms with it, one of the most important things that you have to realize is that all you're selling is trust, right? You are selling this promise that you can deliver on that future reality that you're espousing in your marketing copy. And the best way to sell that is to do it way ahead of time by building an audience of people that know, like, and trust you through your free content, right? And again, that can be YouTube, but it can be podcasting. And I think podcasting is such a popular one, because it's really easy, right? Like, we're live streaming this to YouTube, but I will tell you, Chris, like, it is 100 times easier for me to record a podcast without video than to do video, because I have to do my hair and I have to have good lighting and it has to be quiet. And my son is going to be home in 10 minutes. And if I'm on a podcast, I can just close the door and ask him to go play Minecraft or something, but we're on a webinar. And so it has to be like really perfect. And like anything video for YouTube is the same way. You have to get not just the audio right, but the video too. And I think that folks realize this and say, like, hey, okay, multimedia content is so much better at building trust with my audience and creating that like deep connection. And video is great, but it's really hard. And if you're not a really savvy content creator, like, creating really good video might not even be attainable. And so a lot of folks say, like, hey, podcasting in a lot of ways is better for having like a long form conversation. We use the term intimate a lot with podcasting to say that, like, you can have a really deep discussion with someone just in the audio format that you might not have in video, right? Sorry, I was looking at your comment about Minecraft. Yeah, it's crazy. It's everywhere at our house. But anyway, so a bit of a wandering statement here, but really, like, I think the thing to think about from a marketing perspective, and why, like, I would propose that podcasting could be your single best marketing channel, is your job from a marketing perspective is to build trust with your audience and your prospective buyers. A way that you can have a kind of one-to-many conversation where your audience can spend 45 minutes every week getting to know you and how you feel about this topic and your authority on it. I would challenge anyone to find a better way to efficiently kind of utilize their time than podcasting. So that's kind of my pitch for podcasting as a marketing tool. Hands down, kind of the best, I think. And here's the other thing is we had this kind of like beautiful flower of digital marketing before with all these different petals that are the different channels. You as a creator, and even us, right? We're an 11-person company. We only really do one channel really, really well. And that's with a lot of like pretty smart marketing folks and like kind of power behind our business. And so I would challenge everyone to like pick a channel and pick one channel and stick with it. And the secret, Chris, having podcasted since 2013, knows that like it is not an overnight thing. Like if you're not willing to commit to podcasting or YouTube or content marketing or SEO or whatever it is for a year without seeing like really good results, then you're just not ready to commit yet. And that's fine, right? But if you're like, hey, how can I grow my online course business? I would say pick a channel and commit to it for a year. And it might not be the absolute best channel, but if you do that and you commit, you're giving yourself a really good chance of figuring out how to make that channel work. And I would kind of, propose that podcasting is probably the easiest to make work in that amount of time. Cool. I'm going to breathe. Any questions from anyone on kind of like podcasting as a content marketing channel or a way to build your audience? Anything around that I've kind of talked through?
I just want to say I love what you said about trust. I know it's like intimate to be in somebody's ears, like talking to them, but building trust as like really the core part of sales or marketing or closing the deal. Like trust is the currency of it all, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a really natural way, right? Like we're talking today. I mean, we're going live on YouTube, but this could be a podcast episode just the same. And it's just a way for me to talk about what I know. And if it really resonates with folks who are listening, then they would trust me. And I think that's just really hard to achieve in paid ads or content or email or anything like that.
I have a quick question for you about commitment. I know this audience of course creators, they probably have higher than average like commitment ability. Like it takes a lot to make a course and make content for lessons and things like that. And perhaps they've overcome some of the imposter syndrome of like being on stage and having an offer and all that stuff. But what do you think are the keys to somebody who, if they are worried, like, ooh, I don't know if I could keep up with doing a podcast every week or whatever, what would you say about commitment or how to think about that so they can be like, you know what, I think I can do that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I use the every week kind of frequency because it's probably the most common, right? Like the most common frequency for a podcast is to release episodes every week, but it is not the only way to go. There are a bunch of different ways that you can go about it. I think the obvious one is like every other week. I probably wouldn't go less frequently than every other week, just because I think if you do that, it does relay to your audience like, hey, Chris is just not that into this, right? He's not able to commit the 2 or 3 or 10 hours a month to get me an episode every other week. I'm not going to take him seriously in turn, right? There's a whole bunch of other podcasts. We'll share some analytics about how many podcasts the average American listener listens to, because to an extent it is a zero-sum game, right? I only have so many hours in the car or at the gym to listen to podcasts. And if I'm not going to listen to yours, I'll go listen to someone else. The one that we really like, and that takes a little more work, but is really good because there's just a lot about like how you can form a longer story arc, is to think about podcasting in seasons. So instead of this like perpetual, I'm going to podcast every Tuesday for the rest of my life, say, I'm going to do an 8 or 12 episode season, and it's going to have this kind of topic, right? So for, if I'm going to teach about courses, I'm going to talk about marketing for 8 or 12 episodes. And then I'm going to talk about the actual kind of content creation. Then I'm going to talk about, student engagement and success for 12 episodes. And you have these 12 and you can map them out pretty easily. So, I mean, everyone on this call can probably imagine what those 12 episodes in each of those clusters would be like right away. And then you take a break in between them. And so like 8 episodes in a season is really popular because it fits in a quarter pretty well. So you have 8 episodes and then you have like 4 weeks off. and you tell the audience this, right? It's not just random that like you go for January and February and you take March off, but you say, hey, we're going to start our online course marketing season. The next eight episodes are going to be about this, and then we're going to take a break. And when we come back, the next season is going to be about why. And then you deliver the 8 episodes about why. So this is a really popular way to do it. And then you give yourself that break to catch up on other stuff or just plan out the next bit. But it's a nice way to kind of put some structure around a podcast.
What's the season experience in the podcast list, like on the player itself? Like, how does it affect the structure of the feed or whatever?
Yeah, so there's ways that you can denote a season number within like your podcast hosting platform that then like a good podcasting app would pick up. So that's the most simple answer, is like you have a season number. So you have season 1, episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then some folks have like the naming of the episodes themselves that have like some identifier of a season in it. So you could say like S1, E2 for season 1, episode 2.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Some people say that like Apple doesn't love that, but I don't think it's like entirely wrong. Cool. Any other questions about kind of like podcasting as a content marketing strategy? Anything like that from folks on the call? Cool. Gonna throw some analytics out or metrics about podcast listenership. Again, this is US based. So if we have folks overseas, I'll say, kind of most English speaking countries are similar to this. I think just in terms of scale, next biggest kind of markets are Europe. And then Asian markets are after that, I believe. But, just looking at this, so total US population age 12 and over percent who have ever listened to a podcast, 62%. So 2/3 of the kind of teen or adult population in the US have listened to podcasts, 177 million on a monthly basis have listened to at least one podcast. 40%, say if we averaged the last few years, over 100 million folks. It was interesting. Like, I think this slide talks to COVID quite a bit. And that there, in some ways, was an increase in podcast listenership during COVID. In some ways, there was a decrease. All of our lives changed really dramatically. A lot of folks didn't commute anymore. Some people still don't commute. And I think what we're seeing now in 2022 is that, without being too like meta about it, like a lot of our lives are just changing, right? And how we're living and how we're consuming is just different because we kind of have this new normal that we've had to get used to in the last couple of years. So pretty big boom for podcasting in some ways with the pandemic. Now just different, but still like a really healthy number and growing. We expect it to be over the next couple of years. Number of podcasts listened to in a week, talked about this being kind of a zero-sum game, right? Folks are not finding more time to listen to podcasts. They have their 8 podcasts a week that they can listen to. And if you're not creating content, they're going to delete you from their podcasting app and they're going to listen to, whoever else they have in their app instead. This is 100% how I am. I only listen to kind of a handful of podcasts because I work from home. I listen to it when I'm walking the dog or like if I'm traveling. But if another podcast is recommended to me, I probably would just say, look, I don't have time because I really like these that I already listened to. It's not like I'm going to carve out extra time in my week to listen to podcasts. In a really cool way, podcasting getting more diverse over time. This is a really great thing for the industry to be seeing. Chris talked about public versus private podcasting. Want to just kind of like talk about the pros and cons and the different differences between public and private podcasting, and probably should have like a definition slide up here first. When we talk about public podcasting, it is a podcast that is used for content marketing to get your brand and your message out in front of your audience. These are the podcasts that are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. They are entirely kind of one-way streets, right? If I had to give like a negative about the podcasting medium, it would be that we talk and our audience listens, and there's not currently a way for our audience to talk back to us or communicate and everything with us. Talk about more about that in a minute.
Just quick question. Can I ask a quick question there? Are you mentioning like while it's being recorded or more after it's been played?
Yeah, thinking more like if I record something and then release it next Thursday, after it's been released, there's no way to kind of have folks interact. Like what we're doing, you could make this a podcast really easily, right? You do this and live stream on YouTube or Facebook, and folks can engage there. And that's a way that we've seen folks really engage in kind of like live content creation. Yeah, and really, like, this was the only way to go up until a couple of years ago. Some technology changed to where private podcasting became possible, became attainable for especially for creators, right? Private podcasting has been a thing a little bit longer in the corporate world. A lot of companies using podcasting as an internal communications tool. I think this makes a ton of sense. My background in sales and like field-based sales, driving around in the car all day, like I'm either on the phone or listening to a podcast. I would have loved to have like a sales podcast that our sales team would deliver so that I could learn from like the best performers in our group, so that I can go out and be more successful at my job. And a lot of companies are getting hip to this, even with folks returning back to work, right? Like I think in a way, it will be even more important than with like a flex or remote environment because they're commuting again. But private podcasting, the easiest kind of analogy is to think of it like a membership site or a membership area in audio format, right? So it is podcast content that is reserved only for people who you want to grant access to. I'll walk through kind of how this works with LifterLMS in a few minutes. Specifically for courses, we think of this as an extension of your current like content and way that you are connecting with your audience. So especially our integration with LifterLMS and WordPress through our Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin, 100% Lifter and WordPress is the home of all of your stuff. And then you're repurposing some of that content and adding private podcasting as a medium to stay connected and communicate with your course students. The way or the reason that we really like this is there's not a lot of extra work that you have to do to provide really interesting value to your students. Think about like, what if you just, air quotes, took all of your videos and ripped the audio out of them and made them podcast episodes, right? What if you just had your weekly Facebook group call and did like an AMA thing for 20 minutes and repurposed that as a podcast content? We have a very large customer in the weight loss space that has a weekly accountability group call on Zoom. They save that and they repurpose that as a podcast content or podcast episode just for their members who aren't able to make those live weekly calls. So these are just a couple of examples of like how folks are using private podcasting. It can be as simple as repurposing video and audio format. It can be a really simple additional piece of content that you're creating just for some of your course students, or even some tiers of a course that you sell. I know that, Chris, we've talked before, like a popular thing in the course world is to have maybe a couple of different tiers. Access to the private podcast may be like a good way to upsell folks into a higher tier. I think specifically for courses, the other thing that this does that goes all the way back to like what we're really doing with a course is it like sells this future reality to folks, right? And like in the SaaS world and the software world, we call that success, right? We want our customers to be successful podcasting, and Chris, you want your customers and users to be successful, selling and creating their courses. And you do, I know, a lot of work to help ensure that. Things like this are a big part of it. And so we think that like an accountability group or a community aspect that can be delivered, at least in part by webinar, is a really big part of helping ensure that success. I see we have a question.
I can MC it for you. Drew's asking from the audience. He's concerned about the quality. Like, what if a dog's barking in the background or whatever? I don't know if you can hear it, Drew, but I actually live near a chicken coop. My office is near there, and my rooster goes off sometimes. But I think I have this microphone that kind of kills some of the background noise. But what do you say, Craig, to somebody who's concerned with, um, the quality of their microphone and background noise and being perfect?
Yeah. I think it's, I want to say it's not important at all, but that's not true, right? There is a certain bar above which you have to be, right? Or people will just turn you off. And it is really achievable with, I'll tell you exactly what I use. I have a $80 Samsung Q2U USB mic that is hooked up to a boom arm that's about $30 from Amazon. And then it plugs right into my computer. I use Zoom sometimes to podcast. I record on QuickTime on my Mac a lot of times when it's just me. And if it's an interview-based show, I use a tool called Squadcast, which is about $20 a month. So Drew, it can be super simple for about $100 of kind of hard cost for your gear, and either free or $20 a month. You can podcast as good as you need to get to a really kind of high level.
What about
you can spend $5,000, but you don't need to.
Chris is saying something in the chat about look for something with a noise gate filter just for background noise, I guess. What about perfectionism, Craig? Like, what's good enough? I mean, course creators struggle with this for like videos or their lesson curriculum or whatever. But yeah, what do you say to perfectionism?
Gracious. This is where like Matt from our team is a much better person to answer this question. I would say like it's overrated. That's not a fair thing to say. I would say that like having perfect audio is not your biggest concern for a very long time, right? The most important thing is having really interesting content, and doing that regularly. From there, once you've achieved that, then you can start really, hyper focusing on like audio quality. But if you are, I'll take this to the extreme. If you're so concerned over audio quality that you never start a podcast, you're much worse off than if you buy the $100 setup I have and podcast every week for 5 years.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Chris, I would say like I'll talk about our Castos Academy in a little bit, but if you want, go to academy.castos.com. Matt from our team did a whole course powered by Lifter, entirely free, all about audio gear. And there's everything you want to know there.
One more thing I just wanted to throw out there too is like if you're if you're too polished, like Craig was talking about trust and building trust, like being human and making a couple mistakes in your recording, it actually can increase trust by like, oh, this is a real person. This isn't somebody who sounds like a TV commercial, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So human piece.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So, I think when we consider how we engage with our students or our audience, and this is not talking about marketing, right? This is talking about engagement with our members or our students. We like to think of like there is a right medium for the message that you're delivering, right? So you have this piece of content that you want to deliver. Instead of just, okay, this is an email, I'm on autopilot, I'm only going to send content via email. The first thing that we do for ourselves, right, when we want to communicate with our audience or our customers is think about what is the most appropriate channel or medium through which to deliver this message that we want to deliver. And these are the 6 that are pretty, typically like up for grabs. Is like the website, obviously, YouTube for video, podcasting, email, community. Y'all have Facebook group. Like, I think that's pretty natural. We use Discord for some stuff. And then social media kind of out in public, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. And so I think it's important to think like, hey, as we're going to be delivering this piece of content just for our students, our members, our customers, what's the best way for us to deliver this medium, this content, and like what medium is most appropriate? So this is really just something to think about. But I would just kind of challenge everybody to say like, hey, it doesn't have to be email. It doesn't have to be a blog post. It doesn't have to be a social media, comment. It can be kind of whatever is most appropriate. Cool. So I got about a dozen or so slides and kind of screenshots to show kind of how Lifter and Castos work together. But want to pause for any questions before I do that, because I feel like I've covered a good bit of ground. So folks can either in the Q&A or in the chat. I think we'll take them either way.
One thing I just want to add too about the repurposing the, like if you want to rip the audio out, one of the things people don't always realize is, when you have a podcast app, it's much easier to like download it, listen to it on a plane, go off the internet, go into a subway tunnel or whatever. And your content becomes way more portable. I know me personally, I've been in courses where I had to like get the player playing in my pants in my while I'm trying to go for a run or something. And I'm like, man, I wish this was just a podcast episode. Yeah. I could download it, play it, lock my phone, and then just go. But I love that part about podcasting, the portability of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. All right. So going to show just a couple of slides to kind of talk about how Castos and our Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin and LifterLMS work together. But kind of a good starting point is to think that like what we're talking about here is adding new students that come into the LifterLMS world as private subscribers in podcast. So we're talking about private podcasts, like a membership site in audio format, and you have members, right? We call them private subscribers. And what we're talking about here is automating from LifterLMS as the source of where new students come in and connecting that in an automated way to Castos to manage your private subscribers. So first things first, installing Seriously Simple Podcasting on your WordPress site, connecting it to Castos with this big old long ugly API key that you get in your Castos dashboard. This really connects WordPress with the Castos platform so that all of your content and episodes and files are hosted on the Castos platform. It's not bogging down your WordPress site, but you get to host and manage all of your, I shouldn't say host, you get to manage all of your podcast content on your WordPress site within your course, lessons and modules, or for like a marketing purpose on your blog in a place where everyone is checking out all the rest of your stuff. Need to create a membership level. It can be free or paid, but do need to have a membership level, and that has to be associated with a course. All this is kind of within the LifterLMS umbrella. From there, you will have created like at least one podcast. And I would suppose most folks like on this call, if they're using LifterLMS and they're into podcasting, they probably have a public podcast. With Castos, you can have as many different podcasts as you want within a single WordPress site. And you can set some or many of them to be public or private, right? So you can have your public podcast that you're using for marketing, and you can have your private podcast that you are using just for students. All that is synced over from WordPress to your Castos dashboard. And then here in your Castos dashboard, we're using this Lifter Learning as like a little test podcast we put together, and we've made it private here. And so what this means is like the regular RSS feed and all of the content for this podcast from the Castos side is private and is inaccessible to anyone that's not added as a private subscriber. So regular old public Google can't come and find this in any way. It's private and is inaccessible. The only way that folks are able to access this is to be added as private subscribers, right? And we've built an integration with LifterLMS to where once you enable this integration, just a little checkbox here in the podcast settings and then integration area, simply choose or correlate the podcast that you have on your WordPress site with the course that folks are added to as students to that course. You want them to be added as private subscribers in Castos. So it's as simple as kind of like a little if this then that. And so you'll see like we have other, in this example, public podcasts here, but only private podcasts then can you select a course to associate that with. From there, magically, every new student that's added to that course is sent over to Castos as a private subscriber. This is a screenshot of our subscriber dashboard. And here you're able to do things like add new folks manually you want, or if you want to resend an invite email or something like that to folks. And you see pretty graphs of like, hey, I have 41 private subscribers, and this should, equal the number of folks you have in your course. And you're able to manage all of this here. If you're connected to Lifter, all of this is managed automatically to where when a new student comes or when a student leaves, those folks are either added as private subscribers or removed. So if someone cancels your course or leaves or stops paying, you can set to have them removed as a private subscriber so they don't have access to this kind of member only content anymore. So how the heck do you listen to a private podcast? That's always the third question that everybody says. And really, there's two ways, right? We're big on choices at Castos. We want to give folks as many ways to listen as they can. We have our own mobile app. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. Or if you're already a podcast listener, a lot of folks say, hey, I want to listen to Chris's private podcast right next to Tim Ferriss in my favorite podcasting app. And so at the very bottom here, you see this private RSS feed link that is individualized per podcast and per private subscriber. So it's unique. No one else should be able to access it, so that if, I leave Chris's course, I won't have access to that super secret private feed URL anymore, and is incentive for me to stay.
And I just want to add, I just opened my Overcast podcasting app, and I clicked the plus button, and there I can add a URL. So that's the URL, the private podcast URL.
That's
right?
Exactly right. Yep.
So it's literally just press the button and put in your link.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and I should have had a screenshot of, if you click this kind of listen now button, we have a kind of smart, a very smart page that pops up. So if you open this email on your phone and click listen now, it'll say, hey, I noticed you're on an iPhone. Here's the 4 or 5 mobile apps, podcasting apps on iPhone that support this. Click here to copy your feed and automatically add it to Overcast or the Apple Podcast mobile app or Pocket Casts or whatever. Yeah. And so this is all done right by the private subscriber. So sorry, I'm going to answer Chris's message here, question. So when a learner finishes a course, are they automatically unsubscribed from the private podcast? No, I believe that would be just a setting within Lifter to where, like if folks are like automatically removed when they finish a course or something like that, then they would be removed as private subscribers. But I would guess, Chris, the way most of the Lifter folks use it is like you buy it once and you have access forever. Is that right?
Well, there's an enrollment status, and maybe completion and enrollment are different. So if people complete a course, they may still have access or not, or depending upon how it's set up, or if they're on a monthly payment plan or whatever. But it looks like, to me, the way it works is if they're no longer enrolled, they lose access to the private podcast. But if they're enrolled, they have access.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. And I think that's how it should be, right? We talked about success, the success aspect of like how private podcasting can support your learners, right? Like as long as they have access to their course, they should be enrolled in all the ongoing kind of supplemental stuff that they get from the private podcast. So I think that makes all the sense in the world. Talked about the mobile app available on iOS and Android, is only for private podcasting on the Castos platform. So cool thing about this is if you are a private subscriber of multiple different podcasts of multiple different accounts, you log in once and you get everything all in one place. So pretty cool to be able to access all of your private podcast content in one place. And for folks, like we did a little bit of a survey at the beginning, folks, I think a lot of times are intimidated by podcasting because like there's just a lot to it, right? It is not as easy as blogging, admittedly. And I think, Chris, we probably share a similar kind of hurdle that folks have to get over with, like, I have all this tech to set up and I have to create all this content and I don't know the answer to all these questions. And it's just, honestly, like really, really intimidating for everybody. And so we are fortunate to have like several really, really, really smart people on our team and have this, we call an express launch service, right? And so the idea here is folks who want a chance to talk to either myself or Matt from our team, have us do all the technical setup of all of these things we're talking about, and get your podcast live. Whether if it's a private podcast, it's connected to something like Lifter. It's a public podcast, get it live in Spotify and Apple and Amazon Music and all those places. And we offer this just like a one-time, pretty low cost. It's $199. You get 30 minutes of my time or Matt's time and us to set up your podcast on all the major platforms. And so like, this is just a nice way to get folks over that hump of like, hey, I want to do this, but like, I don't understand what the heck an RSS feed is. I don't want to learn all this stuff. I would love to just talk to a human being and be able to get over this hump so I can go focus on creating content. Our Express Launch package is a really good fit for a lot of folks in that respect. Chris, I have just 3 more things I want to share. All these are like entirely free. And if they help in any way, like super awesome. For us, we put together the Castos Academy. There's several different courses within the Academy. So academy.castos.com, powered by Lifter. Go check it out. Take as much content as you want. If you're just getting started and you're like, I want to learn everything there is to learn about podcasting, this is the place to go. Between myself and Matt, there's hours and hours and hours of content here that's all really actionable. Also have a pretty prolific YouTube channel that I hope is really helpful. This one in particular, even though this is membership plugins, I think it's really applicable for course creators. This like merging or convergence of membership and course and community, I think is really like appropriate, because I think what we're doing is like creating solutions for folks, and it's just a different way that we're describing that. YouTube.com/Castos if you want to check out any of the stuff that we have there. And then we have a Discord group that is pretty prolific, where we just talk about podcasting all the time, and questions, like we had about, what microphone setup and things like that are answered there in quite a bit of detail every day. And that is everything I have to say about podcasting and LifterLMS and courses. But I'm totally up for any kind of questions that folks have.
Just to throw it out there for the people here and also for the people watching the replay later, what's a realistic timeline if somebody's like, okay, I want to start a podcast as like my main marketing and community building and influence building channel, and then I want to, once I get that rolling, I want to add like a private newsletter type podcast for my course students and stuff. It sounds like the express service can get people going up quick, but like, what should people have? Should they have like a couple episodes ready, or, how long does this take? And I'm sure it depends, but what's reasonable expectation?
Yeah, totally. It depends, for sure, is like the easiest answer. But I mean, I think for most folks to launch any kind of podcast, public or private, we like to say it takes about a month, right? From being on a call like this and saying, heck yeah, I'm all about this, let's go do it, to maybe get the gear, record the first couple of episodes, figure out how to edit them, figure out like an RSS feed and how to publish that stuff. Like you could do it in a day, right? But I think it takes most folks who have other things going on about a month. You do want to have several episodes, because the worst possible thing you could do is launch a podcast with an episode or two and then not have time to record anything for 2 months and then have one episode and then wait 6 weeks later and have another one. And everybody that would listen is just going to throw their arms up and say like, hey, Chris is just not serious about this. I'm not going to take him seriously either. I think that in a lot of ways, a private podcast can have a lower barrier to entry. I think it would be perfectly fine if you already have a course and you're like, hey, I want to add this private podcast thing, and you have that weekly accountability group Zoom call, just record that sucker, throw it up as a private podcast, add all of your existing students and say, hey, we have this great new thing for you. And it's literally zero extra work, right? If you want to have like a little Facebook group AMA kind of thing, like that's also just pretty easy. In a lot of ways, we think the private podcasting, the question came before from Drew about like the limit or the barrier from like a quality perspective. Like a lot of us think that like the barrier that you have to get over in terms of quality is a lot lower for a private podcast, because you're really just having a conversation with people that you already know really well. Yeah, so a lot of times you won't even edit that like you would edit a public podcast.
For the do-it-yourselfers out there, what's the order of operations? Like, buy Castos, seriously simple podcasting plugin. Like, if you were to just rattle off, if you could wave a magic wand, what's the order of tech steps for people to do?
Yeah, I think the first one is figure out what you're going to podcast about, right? Like before you spend any money on gear or software or whatever, which we all love, right? Like I love gear and I love all the kit. It's great. But like the most important thing is like open a Google Doc and sketch out like really big picture what your podcast about and who is it for and what would those folks hope to get out of a podcast. That's number one. Because if you don't know that, then everything else is going to be super hard. So like answer that question first. From there, I think really kind of sketching out those first 10 episodes or so, even if it's just a bullet point, like I want to have this person on to talk about this, or I want to do a solo episode about that, or me and my co-host are going to debate this thing. Like get just a bullet point for the first 10 episodes. Once you've done that, I would record some content. So spend the $100 for a pretty simple, podcasting mic and record some content, because I think the potential thing that a lot of folks get into is they go get Castos and they install Serious Simple Podcasting and they have this beautiful landing page and they design a logo and all this kind of stuff, and they never record any content. And I'm pretty like blue collar when it comes to this. It's like record, it's going to be bad, right? Like your first episode is going to be bad, no matter how much effort you put into it or anything you do. Like it's just not going to be as good as your 50th episode. So record something. There is no rule in the podcasting world that says the first thing you record has to be the first thing you publish. So record, and if it's garbage, throw it away and do it again the next day or the next week. But I would try to get to recording content as soon as I could. From there, figure out how to edit it. We use a tool called Descript that is amazing. Lets you kind of like, it transcribes the audio and then you can edit the transcript, and editing the transcript edits the audio. It's super magic. We use it all the time. And then publish it to a platform like Castos. 100% your podcast should have a website. I think everyone that would listen to this, they have a website and it should be on WordPress, and that's where their course lives. The home for your podcast is not Apple Podcast or Spotify. It is your website, because you're using podcasts to bring folks into your world to kind of take some kind of action, take your free course or buy your thing or join your group or whatever. And if they're not on your website already, doing that is just so much harder. So yeah, I guess like sketch out what your podcast is about and who it's for and what they could hope to get out of it. Record some content being number two, edit and produce that content, connect your WordPress site to Castos and publish that stuff and share with everybody.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Drew's asking about the name of that transcription editing software you just mentioned.
Descript. I think it's descript.co.
Yeah, I have heard. I haven't used that one myself, but I have heard good things about it.
Yep, descript.com. Yeah, super amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. And what kind of support can people expect from Castos if they are they're trying to figure out the setup or they got a question? What can they expect?
Phenomenal. I hope. I think that doing calls like this is just kind of part and parcel of kind of who we are and what we do. We have a getting started call every Tuesday that you can sign up for. It's from the Academy website. So if you go to academy.com or academy.castos.com, you can sign up for the getting started. We were talking before we were live, but not recording. We're going to be doing those every day here soon. Which is super cool. So if you have questions about how to get started, every day there'll be a place you can go and get some resources and watch how that's done. And then we have a team of folks in support and success that have just tons of experience in podcasting and our tools to help you get started. Whether it's like questions like, hey, what should I do next? More from like a success perspective, all the way to like, what does this button do and how do I connect to my WordPress site and things like that.
That is awesome. And I just want to say, if you're still just looking to learn, academy.castos.com. So there's people that charge a lot of money for courses on how to do podcasting, and Craig and the team at Castos have essentially given away all that for free. So go check out the Academy for sure. Craig, I want to thank you for coming on the show, or on the webinar. Thank you for integrating Castos with LifterLMS and making it easy, not just for Lifter people to explore this cool innovation of private podcasting, but also just to make WordPress people get into podcasts the easy way with that nice bridge between the two tools. This has been awesome. If you're watching this live, go to castos.com. If you're watching this on the replay, go check that out. If you're on the replay, there's a bunch of links below this video to a bunch of resources we've mentioned here. We did just draw the person that gets the giveaway at the end. That is Drew Bird. So Drew, email team@lifterlms.com and we will hook you up with your winnings. Craig, any final words for the people before we sign off today?
No, it's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope this is helpful for everyone. And yeah, we'll be around if anybody has any questions.
All right. Thanks so much, Craig. And thank you,
Thanks,
everybody in
everyone.
the chat for the thanks. Head on over to castos.com, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Take care.